This podcast is part of the Frederick Podcast Network. Learn more at listenfrederick.com.
Welcome back to Mental Health and Me. I'm excited that you're here today. And as much as I do love my blue checkmark guests, I also love Frederick, Maryland. And I am very excited to do a podcast that's close to home. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart because it does circle in mental health. And I wanted to think a little bit outside of the box because all mental health is not done in my office and it's not always done virtual either. There's many other avenues that we can pursue when we're looking to treat mental health. So today I invited Executive Director Beth Cangemi from Hearts of the Herd. She's an equine specialist here in Frederick, Maryland. How are you doing today, Beth?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. I'm excited. I love the opportunity to have someone here from Frederick in. And I'm going to go ahead and start by describing equine therapy to the listener. And you catch me if I say something wrong, if I'm not getting it quite right.
Okay.
But equine therapy, we would say, is all designed to maybe help build trust, self-awareness, emotional regulation, social skills, all these type of things. And it's done through a multifaceted approach with horses. So it could be riding, it could be grooming, it could be leading or even observing them. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And something that's really interesting about horses in particular is they're known to have a particular sensitivity to humans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the listener may not know this, but I actually did grow up around horses. I had horses. So I've interacted with them and I'm very comfortable with that. But I would say that, I had a lot of animals, but it's interesting to me to watch the equine therapy practice grow because I'm from a more rural area of West Virginia and horses were somewhat common, I suppose, but I had the privilege of interacting with them as a child. But now we're like seeing people actively seek them out for all sorts of reasons. So how long has Hearts of the Herd been around?
So we are very new. This whole process started in October of 2022 after I lost my first horse unexpectedly. And kind of in my time of grief, I had picked up this book called Project Solomon. And it has just, since that moment of finishing that book and reading it and thinking about so many students that I had worked with over the course of the years, that I was like, this has to be here. We have to do this. So we got started, I would say, probably about July. Everything started kind of really rolling. I done some research to see if there was anything around the Frederick area that specifically worked with kids. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for 20 years. So that's kind of where my heart and passion is, to help school-age kids. And so I did some research, and there was a lot around. There's some great programs that work with veterans and people maybe dealing with some addiction and other mental health, but it was mostly adults. There wasn't a whole lot for kids. So within the course of, say, July to November, we really kind of hit the ground running with trying to get a program up and going. So we did apply for our nonprofit status and started actually running programs in November of 2023. So just about a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if someone came to you, if a child came to you, what would a typical equine therapy session look like?
So currently right now, we're actually doing equine assisted learning. So a little bit different where we will be eventually getting into the therapy. That is definitely there's a bigger piece to it, right? We want to make sure we were getting really good at one thing, especially to where I'm coming from the education side. So the equine assisted learning and the equine assisted therapy do kind of look very much the same in the sense that we are really getting to know the individual that we're supporting. So it's really meeting them where they're at and approaching the sessions in a way that's going to really meet the needs that they have. So in our case, obviously, where we're working with kids, we will do an interview with the parent first with a phone call. And then we'll bring out the family to our location to just get a sense of whether or not we think there's a comfort level there. Some will be like, yeah, I want to work with horses. And then they get there and they're like, oh, but then oftentimes we see that change and that shift. Again, as you said, they are amazing animals. They are very intuitive to how we're feeling. They often kind of know how we're feeling before we do and can kind of feed off that. So within that process, we really get an idea and sense from the families of what the specific need is. So I loved how you did mention before the social skills. Because even though we're not fully doing the therapy right now, the learning side of it is going to get to some of those underlining skills. And there's still, even though it might not be a therapeutic approach in the sense that we're approaching it in the traditional session model that a counselor would do or a therapist would do, there's still so much therapeutic positive things that come from being with horses. Just in being in nature and being outside, and we do a lot with grounding activities, all of that kind of comes together. So they bring a calm to a lot of our kids. So there is that kind of underlining piece that we're kind of hitting some of those things that need to be supported and help them in healing without even really directly doing that, if that makes sense. So I know that's kind of a roundabout area. But most of our sessions, it comes in, we always start with a grounding time where we're just getting to, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's, 5 things you see, and everybody does it a little bit differently. 5 things you see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. And going through that with them just to kind of get them centered into the time. We do a lot with activities that support them with what to do when they get dysregulated, and spending a lot of time on giving them strategies with breathing and talking through even just the whole time in brushing the horse has that therapeutic part of it. So kind of just a lot of time getting them centered into what we're going to be focusing on for the day. And then as in with the equine therapy, it is very easiest sense to just kind of say it's very much like the client is doing the problem solving. They're focusing on what they need within the arena. So whether or not we're doing a social emotional skill that we're working on, or it's an academic piece, we have a program called horse-powered reading and horse-powered math. The kids are doing problem solving tasks with the horses and sometimes our donkey to meet the goals that they're working on. So, we do a lot with team building where there's a lot with obstacles where we'll get an opportunity for them to identify the obstacles that are, we always approach our first session is always, we call it either the reading river or the learning river or the emotional river, your daily river. And they just, with all the different equipment that we have within the arena, they build their obstacle and then they name those obstacles. Okay. And their task is to bring the equine over them. And as they're coming to it, we can talk about what that obstacle is, how does it get in their way, whether it's academic or it's something, social. And then they lead the horse over and we talk about the different things as they, you got past it, what could have been something that helped you get through it, and just kind of build some of those self-regulation things and just kind of problem-solving skills that a lot of times it's within them. They just need it brought out. And the horses tend to bring that. They will find kids that struggle with engagement within the classroom. They get into that arena and they are fully engaged in what we're doing, whether it's a social emotional skill task that we're working on or the academic piece. They're engaged because they have they have a living creature, I shouldn't say something, that is there to encourage, accepts them for who they are. They are not worried, the horses are not worried about what shoes you have on or, what you got on the score on that test. They are there to support you. And it just, the whole idea of having this animal that will do these activities with you and engage you in the learning is really cool.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I do agree that for people to interact with animals, I often tell people in therapy, like, well, how does your dog see you?
Mm-hmm.
How does your whatever cat see you?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look at ourselves in that lens, it is so much more accepting. Like they're really not judging us on anything exterior. It's all about kindness and showing them love. And it's this reciprocal thing. But something that interests me in particular is we know that our current society has a problem with getting outside, getting outdoors. We're seeing the effects of this, particularly post-COVID. And people are fighting to get back, I think, to nature. I think that you have to be really purposeful. And there's a great saying that I love. It's that nature's the ultimate sensory bin. So we're recreating sensory bins to keep kids inside when you could really just go outside and interact with nature. And the thing that I like about horses is, you could certainly do those grounding exercises. Like I can smell a horse now, like if I'm really thinking about it. But you're obviously very passionate about what you do. And I would love to know, could you share a specific story about a time where you saw just a child's brain clearly changing, things clearly clicking, or the interaction with the equine definitely having an impact?
Yes, definitely. And it's happened several times where we'll have kids who, when they first come, they're excited, but they're still nervous. I mean, it's a large animal, so there is a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of, timidness around them. And the horses, like I said, they do sense that, right? So sometimes they will keep their distance and allow the child to kind of come to them when they're ready. And then other times they'll very gently just make their way over. And we usually have them on a lead line. especially in the beginning, especially if a child is showing any kind of fear at all. We always have them on the lead line. As the growth comes and they're getting more comfortable, we'll let them off and have them, what we say, at liberty within the arena and working with them. But there have been several times where you see that nervousness in the beginning. I mean, sometimes the kids are even just afraid to touch them or brush them. And then there's been 2 kids that I can think of specifically by the end of the session and the interactions that we had. We always, when they're first learning, we'll have a lead line on both sides, and we'll kind of lead with them, or they'll be able to lead with a partner. And it's amazing the 2 times where the kids by the end were like, I've got this, I don't need you. And you see that shift in that confidence. And as a teacher for 20 years, the one thing that I've seen is that if you can just get the kids to just believe in themselves a little bit, and find those little wins, it just continues to build and build and build, and that confidence grows. And then they start achieving those things that they thought were impossible. And we see that, right? If you have the confidence to be able to lead a 1,000-pound animal around an arena and over obstacles and through different tasks, that starts to bridge into other areas. So those are 2 that really kind of stick in mind. Those 2 specific kids who in the beginning were real nervous and scared, and by the end were like, I got this, I don't need you, I can lead her around. And, and they do. And it's great. Another one that we had the other day, just watching the interactions with the kids. Again, we're bringing in kids that don't know each other oftentimes in sessions. We do try to make sure that kids that we do have in a group together have similar needs and similar personalities to make sure that it works well. And one particular student was just having a moment. The obstacle that he was trying to build wasn't quite working, and he was getting frustrated. He was getting dysregulated. And for him, going to the edge of to the arena and looking out at the other horses in the pasture kind of is his calming time, right? So he was having his moment. We just let him be. We don't, force things. We're not under a time crunch to get, anything covered. It's their time and it's their space. And that's what he needed at that moment. So we just let him be. And the other student, without prompting, went over and just stood next to him. And there was some discussion, but we couldn't hear it. We were, back with the horses. And within a few moments, both of the boys turned around, big smiles on their face, and they got right back into it. And they were working together. So later on, I went to the other student. I said, what did you kind of say, do you mind sharing? And he goes, I reminded him about Plan B, which in the previous session the week before, we had run into a very similar situation. And we always talked about how life, Plan A doesn't always go the way you want it to. And sometimes there's a Plan B. Sometimes you have to go all the way to Plan Z. But you just got to keep trying and keep, working with what you have and continuing to grow through things. And he goes, I just reminded him of that. And it was just so powerful because that lesson actually I wasn't even really directing that conversation to that student at that time, but he had heard it and he had processed it and he was able to use it to help, his partner. And so that's another one of the things I love is just the partnership too with the kids working together with the equines. And it's just watching the confidence grow, even with the academic piece that we're focusing on now. I had one particular family that came and, the mom was like, how's she doing with her letter recognition and all the different things we were working on during the summer session. And, great. And she's like, my child's never read a word before. And you're now telling me she's sounding words out. I'm like, yeah, and again, I think it's a different and unique way to learn and interact and engage within the skills that they're working on. So whether or not it's a therapeutic side and the skills that they're trying to work on to heal or find whatever it is that they're trying to work through, it's that same piece too with the learning side as well. And they all kind of meld. So we're excited to be kicking that piece off. We will really be kind of, as I said, we wanted to get really good at one side of this and then continue to grow. We have my mental health team is incredible. I'm very fortunate to work with 4 fantastic individuals who have jumped into this with me, head first and are ready to go. So we're excited for them to kind of get an opportunity to shine in that way. So the way that our model works is you have to have an equine specialist and a mental health provider. And so right now we're kind of, they're also all equine people too. So that kind of helps that we can kind of bounce with our roles and everything. So yeah, it's exciting. And when you see that moment of that confidence growing or those skills happening, it's really cool to see. And so much of it really is just, it's the engagement of the horses. They just bring something to this experience that allows kids to, number one, feel comfortable, not be afraid to make mistakes. I mean, it's fun when they go up to the horse and they're like, oh, the answer to 4 times 5 is 20. And they're so proud to be able to share with their partner. And it's just that unique partnership that we're making available to kids, and having them outside and in nature and connecting that way too has been really cool.
So we talked about the horses being intuitive, but what other attributes of a horse do you think that makes them a good candidate for this? Because we're seeing the equine therapy and the equine interactions on the rise. Adults are trying to get horseback riding lessons. Like, we're seeing everybody kind of flock to horses right now. What is it about them that you think makes them the draw?
They're such good role models of just being present, right? They're very in tune, being prey animals, right? They're very in tune to what's going on around them, but they're focused on the here and the now. They're not worried about, who pushed them away from the haystack in the morning, or, well, sometimes they do worry about when they're getting their next meal. Ricky always lets us know if we're not out there on time. He's our donkey. But they're very in the present moment. And I think that in itself is very powerful, because I think they remind us the importance of being in the here and the now. And I know for me, I think we all are, right? It's that addiction to the cell phone. You're constantly checking emails and this and that and worrying about the next thing. Whereas when I'm out there with them, I'm really just focused, number one, because it's a safety issue, right? You have to be aware of where they are and what they're doing. So there's that piece to it. But there's just something coming about them. I mean, it's just in the interactions, and they pick up on things. I'll never forget when I lost my first horse. My daughter and I helped take care of the horses together. And she's like, Mom, I've got Shadow the next couple of weeks. She's like, don't worry about it. I know it's really hard for you to go out there. I've got it. And I had to get past it, right? And so I had gone out and sat in the spot where she had passed away. And McKenna's horse, Shadow, who's one of our most amazing horses in the program, I could feel her coming to me. And she's not one of those horses that's like, some are like right up in your face and they're lovey-dovey and they're always wanting the attention. Shadow's never been like that. But I could sense her coming up behind me, and I was sitting there sobbing, and just kind of just feeling all the feels. And she came up and she rested her head right on my shoulder. And at the same time, we both took a big inhale, and
wow.
She let out this huge horse breath right on me. And I exhaled, and it was kind of her way of connecting with me, saying, I'm hurting too. Like, this was my herd mate, right? Like, I'm now by myself in this pasture, which we quickly got, another herd mate very quickly after that. But it was just that connecting moment of just, they sense it, they know it, it is my own therapy. After a long day of teaching, I will go out to that barn and just sit there and just visit with them. And sometimes I just sit and watch them eating. And that's such a bizarre thing. But there's something just like, I don't know, it's hard to describe. Even when they're full of energy and kicking it, there's just something majestic about them. And I just think that they're just fascinating, and they're so in tune to what we're feeling and just connecting, and they just want to be loved, right? They just want that attention, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but they're just really, really incredible animals.
Yeah, I think you said something that is really important too, is that nobody's interacting with a horse while being on their cell phone.
No.
That you're
No.
getting your full attention. You're very much in the here and now. You're watching where that horse is moving. You're if you're riding it, you're certainly paying full attention to everything. So I do think that can be really grounding in itself, that you're living in that exact moment, because it's a safety piece for sure. And so for someone, what would you say to the parent who has no background with horses? Now, me, I'm very comfortable around them, but to a parent who's listening to this podcast saying, man, I'm kind of interested in that for my kid, but I'm concerned about safety. What would you say to them to let them know that it's actually going to work out okay? This is a safe thing to try.
Yeah, we always, being a teacher, I teach PE, so I always tell the kids, like, safety is my number one, right? And definitely in the arena with the horses. We always invite families to come out. Currently, right now, my mentor said, start with what you have, where you have it. So we're running the program from my backyard. We're on 4 acres. We have our pasture, we have our outdoor arena, and we have our barn. So we always invite families to come out just so that they can get a sense of, where this is located and a little bit of a rundown of what we do. They get to see the arena. I've offered to let them come out and actually see a session, going on with kids, obviously with permission from the other families, of course. And, just giving them that opportunity, but knowing that part of my role is I'm always watching the horses to see and, kind of sense them of what's going on, watching the body language change, watching kind of, their steps as they're walking around. Is it picking up? Are their ears, back? Are their, ears forward? Are they sensing anything, there's a lot of different models that are out there, and everybody has their own way of doing things. For me right now, being safety is the number one, right? So like, as I mentioned before, most programs that do equine therapy will often have the horses at liberty. That's really the Agala model, is that the horses are just free to kind of roam as they are in the arena. And oftentimes that's going to bridge those connections with the people as they're trying to interact them and stuff. For now, we always have them on the lead line, and we make sure that we always have our safety talk with the kids, making sure they understand, yes, they might stomp their feet. It's not because they're trying to step on you. It might be because there's a fly that they're trying to get rid of. They might switch their tail for the same reason. So that's the whole idea too of why the Agala model is so amazing, with really making sure that you have your equine specialist and your mental health provider there, right? So mental health provider always kind of watching the individual to check in on them and make sure they're doing okay. And then the equine specialist role is really to watch the horses and the interactions there. We currently also usually only have one in the arena, which kind of keeps things a little bit safer too, because sometimes they do get amped up together a little bit, but we always have eyes watching, and we've got a plan as a team too of what to do if something does happen quickly, getting the kids safe and keeping everybody feeling comfortable.
That sounds reassuring. So maybe you could tell me, at Hearts of the Herd, what is the age recommendation for the children you work with?
Sure. So we always say we're a school-aged program, going from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. We have done middle school groups with our teen girls. We have a program called Be Empowered by the Herd. And as we continue to grow, we're trying to add more programs. And as families are coming to us with interest, we're building programs off of that. We have had quite a few families come to us asking if we'll do anything with younger adults with intellectual disabilities. And that's something that we're looking at as well. So we're always looking to see where the need is. I always say, if there's a need, fill it. And that's what we're trying to do. And really listening to the community when they do come to us. We do try to do a lot of community events just to kind of get our name out there and let people know who we are and what we do, and share a little bit about our program. This coming winter, as we have to kind of slow down, we don't have an indoor arena currently. We are leasing some space at a facility in Thurmont. We're hoping that can be a bigger lease for a longer time, but we'll just be doing a couple Saturdays throughout the course of the winter. And we do kind of like trial sessions where families, they don't have to, we never actually have them like buy a package, right? It's kind of what works for you when you want to come. That may change over time, but we really understand that families are busy. That's part of it. But yeah, we're continuing to just grow and offer whatever programs for the need of our community. But school age K through 12 is typically where we're looking now.
I've been a therapist for 11 years, and so I've seen other people interact with equine therapy for different reasons, or talk about their experience with their own horse. And it's really great because, as somebody like myself, I'm always looking for what I'd say is like alternatives to, not that there's anything wrong with medication, but I'm like, what alternatives? What can we change about our environment to improve our overall mental state? And so certainly being outside, we know, has a therapeutic benefit. But interacting with animals is great. And I do think there's something very special about interacting with horses. And not everybody can just get a horse. So I have a dog, but we can get a dog pretty easily. We can get a cat pretty easily. But having a horse is more of a unique thing. So I love the proximity to this for so many people, because it just opens up an avenue that's not readily accessible to the masses.
Right. And horseback riding lessons themselves are pretty, expensive. So even if you have that interest, for a good reason. I mean, it costs a lot to take care of horses. So that's, I totally understand that cost behind it. And that was really the reason too why we became a nonprofit, is because we want this equitably accessible to all, and trying to make sure that anybody that wants to take advantage of this can, regardless of financial needs. So yeah, and kind of opening that up to our whole community.
Are there any misconceptions you'd like to clear up about equine therapy? Anything that comes to mind?
A lot of people do come to us asking if it's riding. The Agala model that we follow is all groundwork based. So there is no riding. There is such amazing benefits from actually doing therapeutic riding. There's an amazing place up with the Frederick 4-H up in, I believe, Thurmont, which is just amazing. Our program is not riding, so that is usually one of the things that we have to let people know, like, no, your child won't be riding. We really haven't run into anything other than the riding piece. Nobody's really come to us with any misconceptions. And as I said, I think even with the EAL side of things that we're doing now with equine assisted learning, I think we are making those therapeutic connections and making some positive growth happen for kids. We just had a family wrote a testimonial for us, and I just, every time I reread it, I'm brought to tears because, we see it in the arena, but to kind of get that feeling, get the sense from families of what it's doing is super powerful. So yeah, misconceptions, nothing really that kind of sticks to mind other than the riding piece. But, it's not a lot of talk therapy, I guess is a way. It's more the client is really it's solution-based oriented, right? So they're going through and telling their story in however way that they want and feel comfortable with, but trying to come up with a solution to it with their equine partner.
So what do you think is next for equine therapy and for programs similar to yours? As we're seeing this sort of take off and it is becoming more common and more popular, which I love. But, if you had to take a guess, what do you think is next for these types of programs?
I just see more and more continuing to do it. Even here in the Frederick area, when I first looked, there were, like I said, there were a couple that were getting started, mostly really dealing and focusing with adults. But you're starting to see, like I belong to many EAP and EAL groups on Facebook, and you're just seeing more and more people like, hey, I've been a teacher for a long time. I've been a counselor for a long time. I want to, do this modality. I've always been a horse person. Like, how do I get connected? So I think the biggest thing that you're going to see is more and more programs popping up, which I think is amazing. Right now we're kind of limited, being that I work full time as a teacher and all of my mental health providers are all working full time in their own roles. It's tricky to find the scheduling and all of that to make it work for our families. We're hoping down the line as we grow that this does become more of a full-time thing for all of us, but within time. So yeah, that's the biggest thing is I think you're just going to continue to see more and more therapists connecting to it, more barns, trying to have this modality within their place. I've seen a couple of rescues that they already have the horses. So now they're trying to kind of branch out it and give those horses a purpose why they're waiting to be adopted, or some of them stay in their companion animals on the sanctuary horses, they'll call them. So I think you're just going to continue to see more and more programs popping up. My hope is that we can tap into the school system and have this be something that is part of our kids' school day. I know
that would be amazing.
It would be. And that is kind of like when I dream big, like that's one of the things that I see. I think it'd be amazing for FCPS. I know there's a lot of parts that have to come to it. It's a big undertaking, but I know I have the team that's willing to make it happen. And so, that's something that I think is definitely something I would love to see happen. And a lot of school programs are doing it across the country. They have it part of their day. They have it, the way that they make it work out with busing the kids to the place and back to school. It's just part of their day. And it's amazing. They make it work. Palomine, Long Island is one. That's where my mentor is. And I've done a lot of trainings out there and several different networking weekends. And they are in several school systems out there on Long Island, having the kids come out to the farm, during the day. And it's really incredible. So for me, that would be the place I would hope it would go.
Hey, I love that. I listened to you say, and you talked a little bit about how other programs maybe target groups like veterans or people with intellectual disabilities. And I've definitely seen equine therapy specialize in those areas as I've researched this and seen it advertised. And one thing that interests me in particular is I'm an EMDR therapist, which is a trauma therapy, right? So we look at this, and one thing that we would say is that riding horses is bilateral stimulation. So it is a form of that. And I've had clients tell me, I don't know what it is, but I process stuff so much better when I'm riding a horse. And I'm like, I know what it is. I'll be happy to explain the science behind that.
Yeah.
So science really does back these types of things. And you figure not all that long ago, people rode horses constantly. So we're seeing kind of these outlets that people have had for most of humanity disappear because we are now very indoors, or we are overstimulated, which is just as bad, if not worse. So when you do something as simple as ride a horse, which people have done for eons, it's very beneficial to your brain. And I think that those type of cut and dry cookie cutter statements that therapists are kind of encouraging and really saying verbatim, it's like when we look at the science and very easy targeted ways to do this, I think that it's helpful for everyone because we can just get back to basics a little bit more. So the accessibility that you're providing can really help people just process, even like you've had a hard day. And if you can't always go out and ride a horse, sure, I understand that. But the idea that these types of programs are coming up and then somebody could do something like that and just process something that's challenging just by riding a horse, it's just going to help their brain that much more.
Yeah. Absolutely. If you get a chance, if you haven't yet, The Horse Boy is amazing for that. So it's a story about a father whose son was neurodivergent, and they were finding that he made significant gains with his speech and with his just a lot of the skills that he was struggling with on the back of a horse. So definitely one to check out because it connects exactly what you were saying. So yeah, there.
Yes, I'll have to check that.
Yes.
I have not heard of that one. I will definitely read
Yeah.
that. Sometimes I think I'm definitely a bookworm. So my clients, sometimes I'm like, I've got a book for that. Let me share my recommendation.
Yeah.
So you shared a lot about your team and about the people that you've helped, but I would really love to know a lesson or something that you feel like you've learned since starting the nonprofit and just from interacting with horses. And what personal feedback do you have to share with our listener today?
For me, I would say don't be afraid to go forward with what you're passionate about. Starting a nonprofit is scary for sure. I met with one of my past principals early on in this process, kind of getting her feedback on whether or not she thinks this would be something, eventually the schools would do. And, she goes, your passion, I've seen you passionate about a lot of things. She goes, but your passion is like overflowing with this. She's like, you can see your excitement. So for me, just kind of not, there's definitely been some ups and downs for sure. Worry about whether or not you're going to be able to financially make it work. Are we going to get too big too quick and make mistakes? Are we never going to get big enough, as big as we want to get? All those things, but just continuing to press forward. And every time I see and get in the arena with the horses and the kids, and I see that positive impact, it just continues to drive home that this is all well worth every amount of hours that has gone into making it happen. So just continuing to press forward. And, if you believe in something strong enough, just keep going for it. And I know that this is really helping kids in a big way. And that's what we want to continue to see happen. So.
Well, that sounds great. And thank you, Beth, so much for coming in today. You can find more about Hearts of the Herd on Instagram and Facebook at Hearts of the Herd. And then they have a website, heartsoftheherd.org. Mm-hmm. And is there anything else you could share with our listeners that's coming up?
Definitely check out if you have teen girls. We have a program running on Saturday, December 7th and December 21st. It'll be an hour and a half session. And then we will have in January and February, we're going to be doing kind of our mini sessions. We did a summer session this summer where we worked on social emotional skills, some reading components, math components, and art. We do try to incorporate art into the sessions too. It's really cool watching the kids do their artwork with the horses right there. And those will be coming up. We don't have those dates, but we always post anything we have on Facebook and Instagram, and we always have it updated on our program page on the website as well.
Got it.
Those will be coming up. And those are really kind of like trial sessions. So if anybody is kind of interested, and I always tell people, give us a call. It's me that you're talking to. I'm happy to have you come out and meet me, talk with me about the program, meet our herd, and get a chance just to kind of learn a little bit more about it.
Thank you for tuning in today to Mental Health and Me, sponsored in part by the Listen Frederick Podcast Network. Until next time.
Live radio, local podcasts, the Frederick Podcast Network at listenfrederick.com.